powerless. Shame. Desperation. Don't make me do that. She didn't turn around when she said it. Clara Whitlow sat on the fallen cottonwood, her back torn open by rough hands, her dress hanging in torn threads like someone had grabbed it and didn't care what it left behind. Her fingers were locked tight at her waist, knuckles pale, like she was trying to keep herself from falling apart in front of a stranger. Silas Boone stood 10 paces behind her, boots sunk in dry yellow grass, one hand resting near his holster. Not drawing, not yet, just watching. From where he stood, it looked wrong in the kind of way that could ruin a man forever. Whether he stepped closer or rode away, it looked like a man had cornered a young widow in the open field and was deciding what kind of man he was about to become. The horse behind him shifted, uneasy, as if it could smell something turning sour in the heat. Silas didn't speak. He had lived long enough to know that silence made people tell the truth faster than questions ever could. He had seen liars before. They always tried too hard. She didn't. The girl's shoulders trembled once, then stilled, like she had forced herself back under control. "I said don't," she added, quieter this time, her voice scraping like dry wood. Only then did he notice the details that didn't fit the picture. The rope marks on her wrists were fresh, not old, cut deep enough to leave red grooves that hadn't yet faded. There was dirt under her nails, not the kind from working soil, but the kind that came from clawing at it. And then there was the way she held that dress, not to hide herself, to hide something else. Silas took one slow step closer. The sun sat high and merciless above them, baking the valley flat, pressing the smell of dry grass and old wood into the air like a warning. "You're bleeding," he said, his voice low, steady like a man talking to a skittish horse. She didn't answer. Instead, her grip tightened. That was when he saw it. A sliver of metal, barely visible beneath the torn fabric, tucked against her thigh. Small, polished, a derringer, and beneath it, wrapped tight in cloth, something square, something she was protecting more than her own skin. Silas stopped moving. Now it made sense. Not everything, but enough. He lifted his head, eyes narrowing toward the far end of the field. Dust. Oh, a thin line at first, then thicker, rising fast. Riders, more than 2, maybe 4, maybe more. He didn't need to guess who they belonged to. Men who rode like that didn't come for talk. They came to take something back, or to bury it. "You're being hunted," he said. This time, she nodded, just once. "If they get me," she whispered. "This goes with me." Her hand shifted just enough for him to see the barrel angle, not pointed at him, pointed down, toward the cloth, toward whatever she was hiding. "And then," he asked, "and then there's nothing left to prove," she said. "No tears, no begging. Just a fact laid out flat in the heat." Silas exhaled slowly, the kind of breath a man takes when he knows the next minute is going to cost him something he can't get back. Behind him, his barn stood full of hay, dry as gunpowder, enough to carry him through the season if nothing went wrong. The loft had been packed tight for weeks, and in that kind of heat, one spark was all it took. Everything always went wrong. The riders were closer now. He could make out shapes, hats, long guns. One of them rode like he owned the land under every hoofstep. Silas had seen that kind before, Amos Pritchard's kind. He looked back at the girl. Clara still hadn't turned to face him, didn't trust him, didn't expect anything from him either. That might have been the only honest thing in this whole valley. For one hard second, he hated the choice in front of him, because every road out of that field looked like the wrong one. "You pull that trigger," Silas said. "You lose your only chance." "You make me go with them," she answered. "I already lost it." The wind shifted. The dust rolled closer. Time closed in. Silas reached into his coat. Clara tensed, ready to do it, ready to destroy whatever she carried before anyone could take it from her. For a second, it looked like he was about to prove every bad story this land ever told about men like him, about what happens to a young woman, alone, torn and outnumbered. His hand came out holding not a weapon, a match. He struck it. The match left his fingers like a promise he couldn't take back. The flame flickered, small, harmless, almost laughable in that wide-open field. Then he turned and threw it straight into his own barn. Fire caught fast, too fast. Dry hay roared alive in seconds, climbing the wood, devouring years of work like it had been waiting for permission. Clara twisted around at last, eyes wide, shock cutting through everything else. Silas grabbed her arm, hard, pulling her to her feet. "We ride now," he said. Behind them, the riders shouted as the fire rose high enough to change their plans. Ahead of them, there was nothing but open land and bad choices, and one question that hadn't been answered yet. Was Silas Boone saving her life, or had he just set both of them on a path that would end worse than if he'd handed her over right there in the dirt? They rode hard until the smoke behind them turned thin and gray, stretching low across the valley like a scar that wasn't going away anytime soon. Silas didn't slow down until the land dipped toward the old grounds near Fort Owen, where abandoned fences leaned like tired men and no one bothered asking questions anymore. Only then did he pull the reins. The horses breathed heavy, sides heaving, sweat darkening their coats under the summer sun. Claire slid off first, not waiting for help, but her legs nearly gave out when her boots hit the ground. She caught herself on the saddle, jaw tight, refusing to fall. Silas noticed that. Didn't say anything. He tied the horses to a broken rail, then stepped back, giving her space like you would a wounded animal that might still bite. For a while, neither of them spoke, just the sound of wind through dry grass and the river somewhere far off, moving slow like it had all the time in the world. Finally, Clara sat down on an old crate outside the shack. She sat like someone whose body had made it to safety, but whose nerves were still back there in the smoke and dust. Her hands were still shaking, but she forced them still in her lap. Silas leaned against the wall, arms crossed. "You can start talking," he said. No pressure in his voice, just a statement. Claire stared at the ground for a moment, then nodded once. "My first husband," she said. "Thomas Whitlow." She swallowed, steadying herself. "He hauled goods between settlements, nothing fancy, just crates, letters, sometimes livestock." Silas listened, eyes on her, not interrupting. "One night he came home different," she continued. "Said he carried something he wasn't supposed to, papers. Didn't open them, didn't ask. But the men who handed them off weren't the kind you forget." She paused, breath catching slightly. "A week later, they said he stole cattle. They dragged him out, made it quick, called it justice." Silas shifted his weight. He had seen that kind of justice before. Too many times. "And you didn't believe it," he said. Clara shook her head. "I knew him. He wasn't a thief. He just crossed the wrong path." A dry breeze passed between them. Then she went on. "After that, no one wanted anything to do with me. A widow with no land, no money. People don't see a person. They see trouble." Silas gave a quiet grunt. That part didn't surprise him at all. "So I married again," she said. This time, her voice dropped a little. "Edwin Pike. He worked books for Amos Pritchard." Silas's eyes narrowed just a fraction. There it was again. That name. "At first, it seemed like a way out," she said. "A roof, food, someone who wasn't looking at me like I was cursed." She let out a breath that wasn't quite a laugh. "Turns out I just stepped into something worse." Silas didn't move, didn't rush her. "Edwin found things in those books," Clara said. "Land being taken, debts that didn't make sense, names of people who lost everything after one bad season." Her fingers curled slightly, remembering. "He told me he was going to leave, said he had copies. Said it wasn't right what they were doing." Silas already knew how that ended. "He died," he said quietly. Clara nodded. "They said his horse threw him, broke his neck." She finally looked up at Silas. But he knew how to ride, better than most. Silas held her gaze for a moment, then looked away toward the hills. "And the book," he said. "He hid part of it," Clara answered. "Gave it to me the night before he died. Told me if anything happened, I had to keep it away from him." She tapped lightly against her side, where the cloth bundle was tucked. Silas let that sit for a second. two dead husbands, so one powerful man's name showing up both times, and a young woman sitting in front of him with enough trouble tied to her to bury a town. You expect me to believe all that, he said, not harsh, just honest. Clara didn't flinch. No, she said. That caught him. You don't have to believe me, she went on. Just look at what happens if they get this back. Silas studied her face. No tears, no pleading. Just a tired kind of truth, the kind that didn't try to sell itself. He pushed off the wall and walked past her, heading toward the shack door. You can stay the night, he said. After that, we figure what this is worth. Clara watched him, something shifting in her expression. Not relief, not yet. Just a small crack where hope might fit if it was given time. As the sun dipped lower, painting the valley in long shadows, Silas stood in the doorway, looking out over the land he knew better than most men. Amos Pritchard had reach, more than most folks like to admit, for even half of what she said was true. This wasn't just about one woman running for her life. This was about something bigger, something that had already killed twice. Silas rubbed his jaw slowly. Then one thought settled in, heavy and quiet. If Amos wanted that book bad enough to chase her across open land in broad daylight, just how far would he go once he knew exactly where she was hiding? Morning came dry and fast. The kind of morning that didn't ask how you slept. It just pushed you forward whether you were ready or not. Silas was already up before the sun cleared the hills. Clara stepped out of the shack a few minutes later. Slower, but steady. She looked like someone who had made a decision during the night and wasn't going to walk it back. That mattered more than rest. Silas handed her a tin cup of coffee. She took it with both hands, still a little stiff, but not shaking anymore. We don't stay here, he said. She nodded. Where then to Stevensville? Tony answered. That made her pause. That's where they'll look first. That's also where people still talk, Silas said, and where someone might remember your first husband different than the story they were told. He didn't say it, but they both knew if they were going to stand a chance, they needed more than just a story and a hidden book. They needed someone else to say it out loud. They rode in quiet. No rush this time, just steady pace, keeping off the main track when they could. By late afternoon, the town came into view. Stevensville sat low under the summer heat, dust hanging in the air like it never planned to leave. Nothing about it looked dangerous. That was usually when it was. They tied their horses near the edge of town and walked in like they belonged there. Silas kept his pace even. Claire kept her head up. That alone turned a few eyes. People remembered her, not kindly. They made it halfway down the main street before trouble found them. Rufus Bell stepped out from the shade of a storefront, two men with him, both carrying the kind of confidence that came from knowing who backed them. Well now, Rufus said, slow and easy. Didn't expect to see you walk back in. Clara didn't answer. Silas stepped just slightly forward and enough to put himself between them without making it a show. She's not here for you, Silas said. Rufus smiled, but there wasn't anything friendly in it. That ain't your call, old man. One of the men moved first, reaching for Clara's arm. That was all it took. Silas didn't warn him, didn't posture. He just stepped in and drove a short, hard punch straight into the man's ribs. Fast, close. The kind of hit that knocks the breath out and the fight right after it. The second man came in, swinging wide. Silas took the hit on his shoulder, grunted, then answered with something heavier. They stumbled into the dirt, boots scraping, bodies hitting hard. No fancy moves, just weight, timing, and a man who knew how to finish a fight quick. Rufus grabbed Clara from behind, dragging her back. That was when something in her gave way. She twisted, grabbed a glass bottle from a nearby crate, and smashed it across his hand. He cursed, letting go just enough. That was enough for her. She pulled free, reached behind the bar door, and came up with a shotgun, hands shaking, but steady enough. That's far enough, she said. For a moment, everything froze. Then came the sound of boots on wood. Deputy Milo Crane stepped into the street, badge catching the light. That's enough of this, he said. Silas straightened slowly. Rufus stepped back, already recovering. Milo looked at Clara, not surprised, not curious, like he had been expecting her. Clara Whitlow, he said. You're wanted for questioning. The way he said it, everyone knew it wasn't just questioning. Silas watched him carefully. You got proof? Silas asked. Milo didn't even look at him. I got reason, he said. That told Silas everything he needed to know. This wasn't law. This was control. Before it could go further, an older voice cut through. That's enough, deputy. Reverend Hale stepped out from the crowd, calm but firm. He didn't argue loud, didn't threaten. Just stood there like a man who had buried too many people to be impressed by another one. After a tense moment, Milo stepped back. She won't get far, he said. Then he turned and walked off. Rufus followed, but not before giving Silas a look that promised this wasn't finished. Silas watched them go, then glanced at Clara. You still want to run? He asked. Clara shook her head slowly. No, she said. I want to end it. Silas gave a small nod. Then we're going to need more than that book. The sun dipped lower, shadows stretching across the street as the town slowly breathed again. But something had shifted. People had seen, people had heard. And word like that didn't stay quiet long. If you've made it this far, go ahead and subscribe. It helps keep stories like this alive. And before we go on, pour yourself something warm, take a breath, and tell me this. What time is it where you are, and where are you listening from right now? Because the next part of this story is where things stop being rumors and start getting real dangerous. They didn't stay in Stevensville long after that. Too many eyes had seen them, too many mouths were already moving. Silas didn't rush, but he didn't waste time either. By the time the sun dipped low, they were already on the road heading north, keeping close to the river where the ground stayed softer and the tracks didn't hold as long. Missoula was still a ride away, but it was the only place big enough where papers mattered more than rumors. They rode until the light turned gold, then amber, then thin. When Silas finally stopped, it was near a bend in the Bitterroot River, where the water moved slow and steady, like it had no interest in the trouble men carried. He unsaddled in silence. Clara did the same, slower, but she didn't ask for help. That was becoming a pattern. They built a small fire, nothing bright, just enough to heat coffee and keep the night from closing in too tight. For a while, they didn't talk. After a day like that, words didn't come easy. Clara sat on a flat rock, staring into the fire like she was trying to burn something out of her memory. Silas poured coffee into 2 cups and handed one over. She took it, nodded once. Thank you, she said. Simple. He sat down across from her, stretching his legs out, joints stiff from the ride. You held that shotgun steady back there, he said. Clara gave a faint smile. I didn't feel steady. Didn't matter, he replied. Looked steady enough. That got a small breath out of her. Not quite a laugh, but close. The kind a person makes when they remember what it feels like to be human for a second. The fire cracked softly between them. Then the quiet shifted. Clara looked up. There's something I didn't tell you, she said. Silas didn't react much. Figured there might be, he answered. She nodded slowly. When Thomas died, I had nothing, she said. No money, no land, no one willing to help. She stared into the cup in her hands. I thought marrying Edwin would fix that. Silas listened. I didn't know what he was part of at first, she continued. But later, I did. She paused, choosing her words. I carried letters for him, signed for things I didn't ask about, but told myself it wasn't my business. Silas looked at her, steady. And then it was, he said. Clara nodded. Then it was, the river moved behind them, quiet but constant. I wasn't innocent, she said. Not at the start. Silas leaned back slightly, resting his weight on one arm. Ain't many people out here who are, he said. She looked at him, surprised. I should have walked away sooner, she said. Maybe, Silas replied. But you didn't stay. That mattered more. They sat with that for a moment. No judgment. No comfort either. Just truth. Laid out plain. After a while, Sal spoke again. When we get to Missoula, we find records, he said. Land transfers, debts, anything tied to Pritchard. Clara nodded. And if we find them, then we make it loud enough no one can ignore it, he said. The fire burned lower. Night settled in around them, thick and quiet. Clara pulled her coat tighter, but she didn't look as fragile as she had that morning. Something had changed, not healed, but steadied. Silas watched the darkness for a long moment, then spoke without looking at her. "You ever think about leaving all this behind?" he asked. Clara didn't answer right away. Then she shook her head. "If I run now," she said, "then everything that happened to them stays buried." Silas gave a small nod. That was the kind of answer he understood, the kind that came from someone who wasn't running anymore. No matter the cost, the fire dropped to embers. The river kept moving, and somewhere out there, men were already figuring out where to look next. Silas closed his eyes for a moment, not sleeping, just thinking. Because if Amos Pritchard had people in Stevensville and men waiting on the roads, then there was a good chance of something worse. Someone waiting for them in Missoula, already knowing they were coming. Missoula didn't welcome them. It never did. The town was bigger, louder, filled with wagons, rail noise, and men who looked like they had somewhere important to be, even when they didn't. That was the kind of place secrets like to hide. Silas and Clara rode in just after noon, keeping their pace even, not drawing attention, but not trying too hard to disappear either. Trying too hard got noticed faster. Silas led them toward a row of offices near the freight yard. Wood buildings, faded signs, men inside who cared more about paper than people. That was exactly what they needed. "You know someone here?" Clara asked quietly. Silas nodded once. "Eli Mercer," he said. "Used to handle freight records, knows where things get copied and where they get buried." Clara didn't look convinced. She didn't need to be. Right now, they didn't have better options. They found Eli in a narrow office that smelled like ink and dust. He was older than Silas remembered, thinner, eyes a little too quick for a man who claimed to have nothing to hide. "Silas Boone," Eli said, forcing a smile. "Didn't expect to see you in town. Didn't expect to be here," Silas answered. No handshake. That said enough. Eli glanced at Clara, then back at Silas. "You need something in records," Silas said. "Land transfers, debt notes, anything tied to Amos Pritchard." Eli's smile faded just a touch. "That's a big name to go digging around," he said. "So is the trouble that comes with it," Silas replied. A long second passed. Then Eli sighed, like a man already regretting his next choice. "I might know where to look," he said, "but it'll take time." Eli kept glancing at the window more than he needed to. "Then start," Silas said. They waited in that office while Eli moved through drawers, stacks, old ledgers. Clara stayed quiet, watching everything. Silas watched Eli. Something about him felt off. Not fear. Something cheaper than that. The kind of look a man gets when he's already been paid and is only waiting to see how ugly the rest of it turns out. Every movement, every pause, something didn't sit right, but they were already in too deep to turn around now. After what felt like an hour, Eli pulled out a thin bundle of papers. "These don't leave here," he said. "But you can read." Silas stepped forward. "Names, dates, land signed over after missed payments, water rights shifted after sudden debts." And there it was. Milo Crane's name, witness, again and again. Clara leaned closer, breath catching just slightly. "It's him," she said under her breath. Silas nodded once. That was the proof they needed. Or at least part of it. "Thank you," Silas said, turning back to Eli. But Eli wasn't looking at him anymore. He was looking past him, toward the window. Silas felt it before he saw it. That quiet shift in the air, the kind that comes right before something goes wrong. Boot steps outside, more than one. Not rushed, not loud, confident. Silas didn't reach for his gun. Not yet. He just turned his head slightly. That's when the door opened. Rufus Bell stepped in first, 2 men behind him, all of them armed, all of them ready. Eli stepped back quickly, hands up like he had nothing to do with any of it. That confirmed it. Silas didn't look at him again. Rufus smiled slow. Told you we'd catch up, he said. Clara moved back, hand instinctively going toward the hidden derringer. Silas stepped forward, putting himself between her and them. You don't want to do this here, Silas said. Rufus shrugged. Seems like the perfect place. The first man came in fast. Silas met him halfway. One hard hit, then another. No wasted motion, but there were too many of them. A second man slammed into him from the side. They crashed into a table, papers scattering across the floor. Clara tried to move, but Rufus caught her wrist, twisting hard. The derringer never cleared the fabric. Silas got one of them down, but a blow from behind dropped him to a knee, then another, and another. The room tilted. Sound went dull. Through it all, he saw Clara struggling, still fighting, still refusing to go quiet. That was the last thing he saw before everything went black. When Silas came to, it was dark. The place smelled like sweat, old wood and regret. Cold, wood beneath him. Bars in front of him. He'd been in worse places, but not with someone depending on him outside. A cell. His head throbbed. Vision slow to settle. Across from him, Deputy Milo Crane leaned against the wall, calm as ever. Took you long enough, Milo said. Silas didn't answer. Didn't need to. Milo pushed off the wall, stepping closer. You picked the wrong side, Boone, he said. Silas looked up at him, eyes steady despite the blood on his face. That so? Milo smiled thin. That girl's already done, he said. Just a matter of time. Silas said nothing, but inside something tightened. Because if Clara had escaped, then she was alone now. Out there with a book men were willing to kill for, and no one left to stand in front of her, which meant the next move in this story was hers to make. Silas didn't know how long he'd been out. Time felt different inside that cell, heavy, slow, like it was waiting for something to end. He sat there, back against the wood, head low, breathing steady, not because he was calm, but because panic wouldn't help a man in a place like that. Across town, Clara Whitlow was still out there, alone. That thought stayed with him stronger than the pain in his ribs, because Silas Boone had seen what happens to people who stand alone against men like Amos Pritchard. They don't just lose, they disappear. But Clara wasn't running anymore. That was the difference. And that difference was about to change everything. She didn't go far after escaping Missoula, didn't hide in the hill, didn't disappear into the trees. Instead, she rode straight back toward Fort Owen. Back to the place most people would avoid, because that's where the truth had been buried. Clara found the old shack Edwin once used, hands shaking as she pulled loose a warped plank from the wall. Behind it, wrapped in cloth, was the letter he had promised, his handwriting, his fear, his confession. Names, dates, and one line that mattered more than all the rest. If anything happens to me, it was not an accident. It was Amos. That letter didn't just tell a story. It gave it weight, but Claire didn't stop there. She wrote again, this time to people who had every reason not to trust her. Widow, small landowners, folks who had lost something and were told it was their own fault. One by one, she spoke. Not everyone listened. Most turned away at first, not loud, not begging, just honest. And sometimes that's all it takes. An older woman, Mrs. Weller, was the first to step forward. She didn't trust Clara, but she recognized Edwin's handwriting in that letter. Then another. Not a crowd, just enough honest people to make silence harder, because pain recognizes pain, and truth, when it finally shows up, has a way of finding its voice. By the time the sun reached its highest point the next day, Clara wasn't alone anymore, and that was something Amos Pritchard never planned for. Back in Stevensville, the town gathered like it always did. Cattle, trade, deals made in the open and broken in private. Amos stood like a man who owned not just land, but people. And for a second, it looked like he still did. Milo Crane close by, his hand rested near his gun, like he was just waiting for an excuse. Rufus watching the edges, Then Clara walked into the middle of it, not hiding, not running, holding that book, holding that letter. And behind her, people who had finally decided they were done being quiet. Voices rose, questions followed, and just like that, control started slipping. Back in Missoula, the cell stayed quiet until late afternoon, near sundown. The livery owner came through with a water bucket and a key he wasn't supposed to have. Years earlier, Silas had pulled the man's son out of a winter creek in a small town. Some debts take their time. Sometimes that's how life works out here. You don't get justice. You get a second chance. He made it back just in time to see it all break loose. Rufus came at him like a storm. Silas met him the only way he knew how. No anger, no show. Just two men settling something that had been building long before that day. It ended the way those fights usually do. One man stays down. One man stands up slower than he used to. And somewhere in the noise, the truth finally got said out loud. Not perfect, not clean, but enough. Enough for people to stop looking away. Enough for a man like Amos to lose the thing he counted on most. Silence. By the time the shouting stopped, Amos Pritchard was no longer the man giving orders. By evening, the dust settled. No one in town would say it out loud yet. But everybody there knew the old order had cracked in broad daylight. And for the first time in a long while, things felt different. Not fixed, but honest. Silas stood outside what was left of his burned barn, looking at the frame that would have to be rebuilt from nothing. Clara stood beside him, not as the frightened woman he had found in the field, but as someone who had walked through fire and decided to keep living anyway. Not behind, not hiding, beside. He glanced at her, then back at the land. "You still got that fire in you?" he asked. She nodded. "I think I do." He gave a small smile. "Good," he said. "We're going to need it. And maybe that's the part that stays with you. Not the fight, not the fire, but the choice. To stand, to come back, to do the right thing when it would have been easier to walk away. Out here, the land doesn't ask who you are. It asks what you do when it matters." Silas burned his own barn. Clara stood her ground. That was enough. The only question left is simple. When your moment comes, what will you do? If this story meant something to you, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It helps more than you think, and it keeps these stories alive. Now, one quick thing before you go. This story was collected and retold, with a few details shaped to bring out the lesson and make it more meaningful to listen to. All visuals you see are created with AI to help you feel the story more clearly. If this kind of story isn't for you, that's all right. Get some rest. Take care of yourself. But if it stayed with you, even just a little, leave a comment and tell me what part hit you the most. I read them, and I use them to find the next story worth telling.